Hi, my name's Dee Clayton. I'm the host of The Debrief Show, and I'm a multi-award-winning executive coach and trainer. Would you like to know how diversity, equity and inclusion can add to the bottom line? I'm delighted to welcome Celeste Warren today onto The Debrief Show. And this show is for leaders who want to bring out the best in themselves, their communications and their organisations. Celeste has written 2 books on diversity, equity and inclusion, and she's a TEDx speaker, and she's had a career as a VP of Global Diversity and Inclusion in a Fortune 100 company. Really excited to be talking to her today. Welcome to the show. Welcome, Celeste, to the show. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for the invitation, Dee. Glad to be here.
Brilliant. Now, diversity, equity and inclusion is a passion for you all of your life, and you've been working in the profession for 3 decades. Tell us, why do you think everybody should care, not just HR people or underrepresented groups?
Well, everyone should care because if you're a leader, it makes you a better leader. It makes your organization stronger. It makes your team stronger as well. And frankly, you want to be able to have a team where you have instilled trust with them. You can get that discretionary effort because they respect you, because you're a leader who demonstrates inclusive leadership behaviors. You treat them with respect. They have a sense of belonging and empowerment as well.
We talked about discretionary effort on a different podcast, actually, where we were talking about motivation. So our listeners hopefully know about that phrase, because it's like that extra bit that you can get out of people because they believe in what you're doing and the passion. So thank you for using that phrase and calling us back to a previous show. Tell us a little bit about you then, your background and what drives you really.
Yeah, I am from a small steel mill town in the United States in the East Coast. And my father was the first Black teacher and principal in that area. And so every day he came home and we would be sitting at the dinner table, myself and my mom and my 4 siblings. And my mom would ask, how was your day? My father would then start talking about some of the challenges that he faced that day. But he didn't stop with just, these are the challenges that I faced. He would talk about what he did to overcome them. And so that has always been a part of my DNA through my younger years and adult years as well. So every job that I had, every responsibility, every role that I had, I did it through that lens of inclusion, of understanding the dynamics that happens when you feel that you aren't being respected or you are marginalized or you feel that, you were wronged in some way. And being able to say, okay, well, who are we leaving behind as we're implementing people strategies, etc. So it's always been embedded in me. It's who I am.
Fantastic. So I know I've read through some of your introduction, and you're talking about inclusion as a business advantage, not just sort of a compliance issue or a nice to do kind of thing, which I think is really interesting. Can you tell us a little bit about how it can be a business advantage?
So from the inside of the organization, if you are a manager and a leader, you want to make sure that you have a team that is diverse. And when I say diverse, I mean diverse from the standpoint of differences in people you can see and those you can't see. So you want someone with different skills, capabilities, their strengths, their areas for development. You want to make sure that you understand their different perspectives. Exactly.
Different colors. Exactly. Yeah, we were talking about colors earlier, weren't we?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And
I'm holding up, for those listening on a podcast, I'm holding up my color energy bricks from Insights Discovery. You've done that as well, Celeste.
I have, and here's mine.
And you're holding up your color bricks now. So we've got red, blue, green, and sunshine yellow, which is another podcast. So they can go back to that podcast and learn more about the color energies. But you're talking about making sure that different skills are being included, right?
Right, because that's how you get innovation. That's how you get creativity. That's how you get all of the things that you need to do. So you have all of those people with all of those different perspectives, ideas, life experiences, cultures, identities. And in an organization, you're trying to get them to a collective purpose, which is the mission and vision of the organization. And in order to do that, you have to understand who they are as individuals, as performers. And you try to blow those obstacles and barriers that are getting in the way from them having the experience and the productivity that and the access to opportunities that everyone deserves. So as a manager and a leader, that's what you do. You do those acts of equity, meeting people where they are, understanding them, and getting them to that collective purpose. That's the role that you play in an organization. And then when you think from an outside in look, everyone needs to understand, every business leader needs to understand their customers. They need to understand what's getting in the way of their product or their service, them not buying it. And so you have to segment your marketplace. You have to understand your customers, and your customers are very, very diverse with a lot of different needs. And so you have to study that. And when you study that, that's understanding the diversity of your customer base, and then putting those acts of equity in place, integrating them into your marketing strategy, your product development strategy, so you can basically capture that market share. So from an inside and then an outside view, diversity, equity, and inclusion is so critically important.
And to some extent, the more representatives you have internally inside the system, the more they'll be able to represent those similar interests or skills or abilities outside the system. And I talk about it a lot with insights discovery, just even from an introvert extrovert basis, that if the whole company is run by extroverted preferences, even if they've got introverted preferences working there, if they're not listening to the introverted preferences because the bias of, right, we only have a meeting with 24 people in a room and therefore the introverts don't feel comfortable speaking up, even if they're in there, so you could say, well, I let them in, but you're not listening to them. So you've got to be able to have a system that allows people to be present, but also respected and heard. Have you got any tips on how people do that, or maybe don't do that?
Well, one of the things, if you have a staff meeting, well, first of all, don't just have a staff meeting. Make sure that you're meeting one-on-one regularly with your team. That way they have a connection with you that's at a more intimate level. And then when you're in your staff meeting, make sure that you are paying attention and reading the room, if you were, about who is speaking up and who's not, whose voice is being heard and whose voice you haven't heard yet. And be proactive and just say, Dee, we haven't heard from you yet. What's your perspective on X, Y, or Z? That's really important. And that's, part of being present in the room, listening, understanding your team. And you might even bring in and say, we talked about this idea that you had, Dee, when we were talking one-on-one. I thought it was fabulous. Can you share it with the team? I think it would be great. And encouraging them, because you need that creativity. You need those good ideas. And if you shut people down, you won't get them.
Fantastic. So when people talk about DEI, some people say it lowers the standards. Obviously, we don't say that. But what do you do when people say that? How do you respond to that without blowing your top? What do you say?
Well, I've been in discussions where it's the hiring manager, they have a job opening, and it's in the recruiter. As the HR leader, I might be sitting in these meetings, and the manager says, okay, these are the skills I need, the capabilities, the years of experience, what that experience should look like, and whether it needs a degree or it doesn't need a degree. And then the recruiter says, got it. Yep, okay. And I'm going to make sure that I bring you a diverse slate of candidates too for you to choose from. And then the manager says, oh, wait a minute, I want quality candidates. And so I'll stop the conversation there and say, okay, why did you feel a need to say that after the recruiter heard all of your expectations of the role and then said they were going to bring you quality candidates, a diverse candidate slate? And they usually hem and haw and this and that, but it's just a teaching moment. And I say that, you need to understand they're going to do their job. You've told them what you need, the requirements of the role. You need to understand that those requirements can be embodied in a vast amount of identities. They're going to go out and get you the people that fill those requisitions and those requirements. They're just going to look a lot. There's going to be diversity in what they look like, but the quality is still going to be there. And that's basically kind of how I have the conversation. So that, it's a teaching and a learning moment.
Yeah, actually, you've got more people to choose from the wider you fish. And it's a bit like this working from home now. You don't even have to sort of discriminate based on location anymore. If they can work from anywhere, you've got this huge pond of people you can choose from. So you've got, the standard of applicants probably going to go up actually rather than down. So, I mean, it's sort of bordering a bit on this political idea, and I know it's maybe bigger in the US, but it is still here in the UK as well. Maybe some leaders want to support diversity, equity, and inclusion, but they're worried about doing something wrong or fearing a backlash because they supported the wrong thing, or something's trending on Twitter, or, how do they support but avoid the backlash? What's your suggestions there?
Well, I would say what you want to do is you want to demonstrate inclusive leadership traits. You want to make sure that, as I was saying earlier, you know your team, you're meeting one-on-one with them, you understand what they do well, what they need help in, you're helping to meet their needs, you understand what barriers and obstacles are getting in their way. You're having this dialogue with your team members, so you understand them, and then you start to work with them and partner with them to provide the developmental opportunities that they need, to clear out those obstacles that are getting in their way, to help them to get to the access that they need to be able to perform well, to be able to reach their career aspirations. That's all we're asking you to do. And if you can do that and do that well, you've demonstrated that you are an inclusive leader. You've demonstrated that you are treating your team equitably, and you've demonstrated that you're trying to make sure that everyone on your team has access to opportunities within the organization.
See, that just sounds like a good leader to me.
That's it, Dee. That is exactly it. But we both know in organizations that, how many times have you had different jobs and your boss was not up to expectations?
Yeah. Or you think people get chosen for a role, and the reason they give you is, oh, well, you haven't got enough experience in X, but it's because they look a certain way or act a certain way, or they play football with the boss's son, or there's all this other stuff going on as well, isn't there, sometimes?
Yeah.
I think you were telling me before we started recording about the like bottom line benefits you can get from doing this well, and you were talking about disabilities, weren't you, and about some of the things that maybe were created to benefit people with disabilities are now a benefit for all of us. Can you tell us a little bit about that, or anything else in that line?
Because I talk about how when we have fair and equitable practices, it benefits everyone, not just those in marginalized or underrepresented groups. And the example that I talk about is many of the accommodations that were initially created for persons with disabilities. So, voice activation on our phones, those were created for persons with disabilities, but now everyone uses it. I mean, because my thumbs, I don't know if it's my nails or whatever it is, but I just speak into my phone when I'm texting my kids or my husband or somebody, because it's easier, but it benefits all of us. And that's just an example. Accommodations in the workplace, most of those were created for persons with disabilities in the workplace so they could be more productive. And many of us are taking advantage of that. The sit stands, we're trying to be healthier. So we're raising our desk up and we're standing. And, I've even seen some people in their home offices, they actually are on a treadmill.
Yeah.
And they're talking to me on a treadmill, and their laptop is on the thing. And that's how they've set it up. And more power to them, because they want to stay healthy and they don't want to be sedentary. So those are just some examples.
But are they out of breath when they're talking to you? They look normal.
The funny thing, they're not. That's how in good shape they are.
Oh, yeah. I think if you're normal walking, you could do it, but it's a bit distracting if somebody's actually running. But that's raising, like I was saying earlier, that's kind of letting everybody, you're raising the bar rather than lowering the bar, aren't you, there? Yeah. So if you had a magic wand and you could talk to the leaders listening to this show, what would you wish that they could do better or more of or differently?
Well, what I would wish leaders could do is that they would just treat their employees fairly, equitably, and with respect. And that sometimes seems like it's pie in the sky, but you did say if I had a magic wand. That's what I would want people to do.
I think the leaders listening would say they do that. Can you explain then the difference between fairness and equity? Because I think most people would say they do that and not realize that maybe they don't do that. Can you try and give us, I think respect is maybe hopefully self-explanatory, maybe not. Could you share with us how we might accidentally not be doing that, even though we think we are?
Yeah. So, the example that I would give is, let's say I'm up for a promotion and Joe is up for a promotion as well.
Mm-hmm.
I have the skills, the capabilities, the required experience, the required education, and Joe doesn't. I get the job. Joe doesn't get the job. Joe thinks that it was unfair. So fairness is in the eye of the beholder.
Mm-hmm.
Equitable practices are what led the best candidate getting the role. There was clear description of what the skills are needed, the capabilities that are needed for the role, the level of experience, the years of experience, the type of education that's required. And then the recruiter goes out, searches for those candidates, and gets candidates. People are interviewed using structured interview, meaning everybody's asked the same questions in a panel discussion, so you can get a vast set of eyes on the candidate answering the questions all at the same time. So it's an equitable process where you're trying to take as much as you can the bias out of the talent acquisition process. It yielded the top candidate. That's the difference between fair and equitable.
Mm.
So you want it to be, when a lot of times we use it interchangeably, but there is a distinction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Joe thought it was unfair. Celeste
Yeah.
thought it was fair.
Mm-hmm. And you're talking about the recruitment process. There's another show that I did about recruitment, actually, so people can have a little listen to that. But do you think that's a good idea then? Have you seen good results by having the same interview questions? I've heard mixed results about same interview questions for everybody. Obviously helps you with equitable, but does it improve the outcome? Or, what your experience of that then?
Well, if people are doing the process as it's meant to be done, yes, it does work. Again, we're humans, we have our biases, etc. But if you have panel interviews, I think panel interviews are so powerful because instead of Celeste going to Dee's office and having a conversation, and Celeste going to John's office and having a conversation, and then Dee and John come together and say, well, she didn't say that to me, or she said that to me. She didn't say that to me. If you have a panel where Dee and John and Carol and Sally are sitting in a room and they're asking structured questions of the candidates, they're hearing the answers at the same time. When they have the discussion to say, who are we going to hire, or who is the hiring manager going to hire, there doesn't need to be that discrepancy because they've all heard the same words coming from the same candidate at the same time.
Yeah, and we can call people out who maybe misheard or were sleeping in that moment. You can go, well, she did demonstrate actually that she'd done that because
that's
blah, blah, blah.
exactly
so,
it.
Yeah.
And it's another opportunity to it's a learning opportunity as well in that we call them wrap-up sessions in that session, because the person that may not understand his or her biases, that other leader can call them out on it in a way that treats them with respect. But those conversations are opportunities to widen the screen for people as well.
Before I kind of ask my last question about AI, actually, you're saying about biases. Do you have some examples of biases that people don't know they have? Like, you must see this all the time. For you, it's probably obvious. But for people who don't see it, they don't see it. So then it's not obvious. Do you have some examples of that?
Well, let's take from a generational thing. Generation Z is not just coming to the workforce, they're in the workforce. And their idea of coming into a work environment, just from the standpoint of how they dress, their in deference to authority, their ideals and their beliefs and how they stand and hold true to them, is different to someone who maybe is in the Boomer or Gen Z or Gen X generation, because that's not the way they were when they were coming into an organization. They assimilated more, where Gen Z coming in, they're like, no, I'm me. You hired me because I'm me, and I'm going to continue to be me. So, and so that has a bias from a generational standpoint, because
I'm even thinking dress code, something as simple as dress code, which isn't
oh
simple,
yeah,
right?
exactly. So it's those things that your biases, that you have to put them in check. Be conscious of them, because we all have them. Be conscious of them, put them in check, because when those enter into how you're making people decisions, that's when it becomes a problem.
Oh my goodness. Okay, brilliant. That's amazing. So the other area that's impacting everybody's work is AI, isn't it? And there's lots of questions about AI. But is there bias in AI? I assume there is. And if there is, what can we do about that?
There's definitely bias in AI, because an algorithm is being created by a human being, last I heard, and that human being has conscious or unconscious biases. So one of the things is checks and balances throughout the whole process. So instead of one person creating the algorithm, a team of people creating the algorithm, and then checking it. So doing when the outcomes come, putting it in a pilot mode, if you will, and checking to see, is it really benefiting everyone? Is it leaving a group of people behind, and why? And then going back and checking the algorithm and making changes. So it's who's writing it, what the outcomes are, checking on that, going back and course correcting, and making sure that you have a team that's involved in that process throughout.
Yeah, you could even add a prompt in, couldn't you? Just add a prompt in to say, look out for, have your policy written out and go, this is, here's an example of what we don't want. But it's just adding that extra layer in, isn't it? To even think, to even assume that, because you imagine a machine wouldn't be, I kind of imagine my Excel spreadsheet wouldn't be biased, right? So it's
but
different.
You're putting information in the Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, so it's different, isn't it? Because we've always thought that machines aren't biased, but now with AI, of course, they are biased. And so we need to realize that. So put an extra layer of safety in, maybe, to check that. Yeah. Thank you so much. There's so much there. We could chat all day, I'm sure. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you think is really important for leaders to know about this topic, or anything around this topic that we haven't covered that you thought, I want to share? I mean, you haven't told us about your book. You can tell us about your book and maybe something from there.
Yeah, so my book is The Truth About Equity, what it really is, what it isn't, and why everyone wins when we get it right. And it's a pragmatic approach to how we need to be thinking about equity. It's not a dirty word. It talks about what it is, and it talks about it in the consense of diversity, inclusion, fairness, all of those things that we've talked about today. And then also what it isn't. What are some of the myths surrounding it? And then what we kind of talked about a little bit today as well, why everyone wins when we get it right. So please pick it up on Amazon, your local bookstore. If they don't have it, ask for it and they'll order it around the globe. But I just want leaders to be better leaders. I want managers to be better managers, not just for the workforce that's there today, but the workforce that's going to be there tomorrow.
That's fantastic. And you've added your contribution to that, and all of our listeners will be thinking from a more wider standpoint now and thinking, okay, how can I add that extra layer in? So thank you so much for that. Been lovely speaking to you, and good luck with the book and your TED Talk that we haven't even talked about. But good luck with all of that, and we look forward to seeing the TED Talk soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Dee.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Debrief Show, and special thank you to Celeste. Her book is called The Truth About Equity and is available on Amazon. And for more information about Celeste Warren, please take a look at the show notes. And if you'd like to know more about the episodes we talked about in the past that we've done, or follow us for future episodes, then you can find us on all good podcast platforms like Apple and Spotify under The Debrief Show, or you can follow us on YouTube. If you'd like to watch us in action, then we're available on a YouTube channel. Just follow my channel, Dee Clayton, and look for The Debrief Show. So we'll see you there. We really appreciate this. And if you want to share any of these episodes with other people that you think would be interested, we would really appreciate that too. Thank you. Continue to bring out the best in yourself, your teams, and your organizations.